The train station smelled of coal dust, cold iron, and something faintly sweet, roasted chestnuts from a vendor near the exit. Snow lay in thin, uneven patches along the platform, half melted by boots and time. Above everything, the old clock ticked loudly, its hands creeping toward noon. Elena stood near the far bench, fingers clenched inside woolen gloves that were too thin for January. Her suitcase rested at her feet, small and scuffed, the kind that carried a life reduced to essentials. Inside it were folded dresses, a photograph of her parents, a wedding shawl she had sewn herself, and hope, fragile, bright, and trembling. Today he was supposed to arrive. Today she would no longer be alone. She checked the clock again. 11:45. The train from the west had already come and gone, spilling passengers onto the platform, families reunited, lovers embracing, strangers brushing past each other without a second glance. Elena had watched every face, her heart lifting with each tall silhouette, then falling again when it wasn't him. "It's New Year's Day," she told herself softly. "Trains run late. Men get delayed. This is normal." She had repeated those words so many times they had begun to sound hollow. Around her, the station hummed with life. Children laughed, dragging sleds. Soldiers embraced mothers. Vendors shouted prices. Somewhere, someone played a harmonica, the notes thin but hopeful. Elena pulled her coat tighter and smoothed the edge of her scarf. She had chosen it carefully, soft blue wool. The color, he once said, reminded him of summer skies. She wanted to look like a woman worth arriving for. After all, he had promised. She had never met him in person. That fact, whispered in her mind, sometimes made her feel foolish. Other times it felt romantic, like a story meant to be told. Their letters had begun 2 years earlier, through a distant cousin who believed strongly in fate and second chances. Elena was 22 then, living in a small village, where opportunities dried up as quickly as the riverbeds in summer. Her parents were gone, her mother from illness, her father from an accident in the fields, and she survived by sewing for neighbors. Mending clothes worn thin by hard lives, he had written to her first. His handwriting was careful, slightly slanted, each word deliberate. "I am not a poet," the letter said, "but I am honest. I have a small house, steady work, and a child who needs a mother. If you are willing, I promise respect. A child who needs a mother." That line had stayed with her. Over time, his letters grew warmer. He spoke of the boy, Daniel, quiet, observant, too old for bedtime stories, but still young enough to cling to a sleeve when afraid. He spoke of winters that were harsh, of a house that felt empty, of evenings when the silence pressed in. Elena wrote back with equal care. She spoke of her sewing, of the way snow sounded different in the village, of how she missed having someone to say goodnight to. Slowly, something like love formed, not fiery, not reckless, but steady and hopeful. When he proposed, it was in a letter dated October. "If you come on New Year's Day," he wrote, "I will meet you at the station. We will begin our life together then. A new year, a clean start." Elena had cried when she read it. She believed him. Noon came, then 12:30. The crowd thinned as families left for warm homes and celebrations. The chestnut vendor packed up. The harmonica fell silent. The cold sharpened, biting through Elena's gloves. She shifted from foot to foot, her breath clouding the air. "Perhaps he missed the earlier train," she whispered. She went to the ticket window, asking timidly if another westbound train was expected. The clerk shook his head without looking at her. "Next one is tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. Elena returned to the bench, her legs suddenly weak. She sat, hands folded in her lap, staring at the tracks as if willing them to produce a miracle. She imagined him running late, breathless, apologetic. She imagined his smile when he saw her, the way he would take her suitcase, the way he would say her name aloud for the first time. But the platform grew emptier by the minute. The clock ticked on, merciless. By 2 o'clock, the station was nearly deserted. That was when doubt crept in. What if something had happened? What if he changed his mind? What if she had misunderstood everything? Her throat tightened and she pressed her lips together, refusing to cry. She had promised herself she would be brave. She had already lost too much in life to collapse now. Still, the silence around her felt heavy. And then, "Mama?" Elena froze. She turned slowly, certain she had imagined it. A little boy stood a few steps away, his boots dusted with snow, his coat too big for him. He looked about 5 or 6, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and cheeks reddened by the cold. In his small hand, he clutched a wooden toy train, one wheel broken. He looked at her as if he had known her all his life. "Mama," he said again, softer this time. Elena's heart lurched painfully. Her voice caught. She knelt in front of him, meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I think you're mistaken." The boy frowned, studying her face with solemn intensity. "You're Elena," he said. The sound of her name from his mouth stole the breath from her lungs. "Yes," she whispered. "How do you know my name?" He held out the toy train. "Papa said you were coming today." "Papa." Her hands trembled as she took the toy, more to steady herself than to examine it. "Where is your father?" she asked carefully. The boy's gaze dropped to the ground. He scuffed his boot against the stone. "He didn't come," he said, "so I came instead." The world seemed to tilt. Did he send you?" Elena asked. The boy shook his head. "He said, wait." But I waited, and you looked lonely. Lonely. Something inside her cracked. Elena glanced around the empty station. "Where is your home?" The boy pointed vaguely toward the town beyond the tracks. "It's cold," he added. "And Papa didn't come back yet." 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Fear, confusion, disbelief. But beneath them all was something deeper, something undeniable. This child had found her, and somehow, impossibly, he believed she was his mother. Elena wrapped her scarf more tightly around her neck, then gently took the boy's hand. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel," he replied. The name echoed through her, familiar from letters read by candlelight. Daniel. She swallowed hard. "Daniel," she said softly. "How did you know I would be here?" He shrugged. "Papa showed me your picture." Elena's chest ached. She had sent one photograph, herself standing by the window of her small room, hair braided, eyes hopeful. The idea of this child studying it, memorizing her face, made tears sting her eyes. "Are you hungry?" she asked. He nodded. She hesitated only a moment before making her decision. "Come," she said, standing. "Let's get warm." She took him to the small cafe inside the station, one of the few places still open. They sat near the stove, steam rising from cups of tea. Elena ordered soup and bread, watching as Daniel ate with careful, grateful bites. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. She studied him, the way he held his spoon, the way his eyes darted around the room, always returning to her as if to reassure himself she was real. After a while, he looked up. "You're really here," he said. "Yes," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. He smiled then, a small, uncertain smile, and something inside her settled. Whatever had gone wrong, whatever explanation waited, this child was here, and she would not leave him alone. Daniel led her through narrow streets dusted with snow. The town was quieter than the station. Most people indoors, celebrating the new year. The house stood at the edge of town, small, wooden, smoke curling weakly from the chimney. Inside it was clean but sparse. A single bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a shelf of books, and a coat hanging by the door. "Papa's coat," Daniel said, touching it. Elena nodded. She helped him remove his boots, then knelt to warm his hands. "When did your father leave?" she asked gently. "This morning," Daniel said. "He said he would come back before dark." Elena glanced at the window. The sky was already fading. She felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold. That night, she tucked Daniel into bed, wrapping him in blankets. He watched her with wide eyes as she smoothed his hair. "You're not leaving?" he asked. "No," she said, surprising herself with how true it felt. "I'm here." He reached out and took her hand, holding it as he drifted to sleep. "Mama," he murmured. Elena sat beside him long after his breathing slowed. Where was the man who promised her a future? Why had he not come? And what would happen now? The knock came just after dawn. Elena rose quietly, careful not to wake Daniel. Her heart pounded as she opened the door. A woman stood outside, wrapped in a thick shawl, her face lined with worry. "You must be Elena," she said softly. "Yes," Elena replied. The woman exhaled, relief and sadness mingling in her expression. "I'm Marta," she said. "I'm his sister." Elena stepped aside, letting her in. They sat at the table, the silence heavy. "He's gone," Marta said finally. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "Gone?" she echoed. "He left town last night," Marta continued. "He was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of not being enough," Marta said. "Of failing you. Of failing Daniel." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "He loved you," Marta said quickly. "But love can make cowards of some men." Elena closed her eyes, letting the truth settle. "And Daniel?" she asked. Marta looked toward the bedroom door. "He needs someone," she said. "Someone who stays." Elena felt a weight lift and settle at the same time. She had come to begin a marriage. Instead, she had found a child. And somehow that felt like purpose. Days turned into weeks. Elena stayed. She cooked, cleaned, sewed curtains for the windows, mended Daniel's clothes. She walked him to school, listened to his stories, held him when nightmares came. People in town began to notice. They saw the way Daniel smiled now, the way he ran ahead, then back to make sure she was still there. They heard him call her mama without hesitation. Elena corrected him at first gently. But one night, as she tucked him in, he looked at her seriously. "You don't go away," he said. "That's what mama means." Her eyes filled with tears. From that night on, she let the word. Sometimes Elena thought about the man who never arrived. She wondered where he was, whether he regretted his choice. She wrote him one letter, then burned it in the stove without sending it. She had nothing to say that mattered anymore. Her life had shifted, reshaped by a small hand in hers. By spring, the house felt alive. By summer, laughter echoed through its rooms. By the next New Year's Day, Elena stood at the station again, this time with Daniel beside her, holding her hand. They watched the trains come and go. "You waiting for someone?" Daniel asked. She smiled down at him. "No," she said. "I already have who I need." He leaned into her side, warm and solid. And as the clock struck noon, Elena realized something quietly, completely true. He never arrived for his bride? But a child did, and in answering that call, she became exactly who she was meant to be.